welcome the honourable member, Justin Trudeau. Well, country, how are you doing? How are you, man? Good, good. You well? Glad to see you.
Thanks.
How's it been?
It's been busy.
Yeah?
Yeah. New baby, big job, a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, you got a job? What are you doing? What are you working on?
Well, for those of us, a lot of people here don't follow politics, but no, it's been a lot of fun as leader.
Did you have an idea of what this job could be?
I did, and I've been really, really overwhelmed with how positive an experience it's been. I mean, you think you take over a party that's down in the dumps, that really is literally in the rump of the House of Commons, right. And people have been writing it off, and you decide you're going to go as positive as you possibly can, and to see the response right across the country, positive, enthusiastic, open to politics, being done positively, talking about serious issues in a way that isn't attacking and negative. It's time, but it's a reflection of Canada.
Is it, and that's a great concept, but is it like that partly because we're not in a full-on campaign, and that everybody knows that when campaigns start, there are often different tones. You just have to take a different tone.
But we are in a full-on campaign. This government has brought in the permanent campaign. Everything they do is about getting re-elected. And therefore, it's a constant engagement in that perspective. But it's also, it's the way politics is now done. I mean, the old mindset of, okay, you vote someone in, you check in how they're doing 4 years later and decide if you want to keep them or change them for the new guy. That's not what it is. Now with social media, with the amount of information people have access to, it's an ongoing engagement process. I think we're better for it, but it's a different way of doing politics.
You listen, never mind the fact that you're Liberal Party, but your last name, you're going to have a lot of work to do in the West, man. And I mean, by that I mean the prairies in Alberta. You have a lot of work to do.
You know what? I made my very first campaign stop as launching my leadership campaign in Calgary, and I go back to Alberta and the prairies every few weeks almost to talk with people, and there is a lot of openness to not being taken for granted anymore. Lots of people in the West are really frustrated. They elected good people to represent their communities in Ottawa, and instead they just get back the Prime Minister's voice in their communities, and that's not in keeping with the Western tradition.
But that's in keeping with Canadian Parliament. Jean Chrétien ran it that way. Paul Martin tried to run it that way. He didn't run it enough that way. That's why maybe it collapsed. We know that Mr. Harper's good at it. Mr. Trudeau was good at it.
There has been a rise over the past 40 years of a centralization of power in the office of the Prime Minister and expecting that MPs simply rubber stamp what the government wants to do, particularly backbench MPs. That's why one of the things that I committed to is loosening up the rules around whipped votes, allowing more free votes, allowing for actual debate between members of Parliament of different parties and within our own party.
How do you do that when you want to get, especially if you want to get stuff done, you need people to vote in line with what the party believes.
Yeah, but you have to trust that the things you want to get done are in the interests of the country. And if they're in the interests of the country, you're going to be able to get people to support it. I know it's idealistic, absolutely, but
some would
reflects,
say naive.
Sure, but you know what? We've tried the other way. Let's actually expect more of our members of Parliament. Let's ask for real debate. Let's ask for people to actually, think about and study the bills and amend them and improve them if we have to.
How are you going to tackle some of the other? I mean, there's some quotes from your passage you're answering. I know I see them in the ads, and you're answering. Some of them, attack ads are often just sort of whatever. They're a waste of time.
Well,
but a lot of times they're legitimate, right?
I think
it's
important
says an awful
to
work
work
on your record, right?
About the government, that they choose to take me. I mean, you know how it is, George. You go to a charity fundraiser. You agree to raise a few $1,000s by auctioning off a lunch at the parliamentary restaurant with you, and the Conservatives turn it into a attack ad. That pretty much says all you need to say.
Yeah, but also Canada isn't doing well right now because Albertans who control our community and socio-democratic agenda, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's a challenging quote to have to answer for.
Sure it is, and I apologize for it, and I talked about the fact that it's tempting in Canada as a politician to play one region against another, because there's always, I mean, if you look at the map, you can say, okay, I play really well there, and we could ignore them because I'm not getting any votes there. And yeah, I fell into the trap. But from that point, I learned a very serious lesson. And I spend as much time in Alberta as anywhere else across the country because I know that you cannot play favorites. You can't, pander to votes in the East by attacking the West or vice versa. And that's what I've been committed to do since I've been the leader.
I want to play you a clip from Michael Ignatieff when he's in the retro. Not the clip about Justin, but the other clip about leadership. Talking to you now like this, when you're not campaigning, there's an air about you that's different than when you're the leader, because you have different things. Could this guy run?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If I was doing this and I was still the leader, every darn thing coming out of my mouth would be strategic.
Yeah, and that's why people don't want to vote.
I would have to fit, for very good reasons, a filter between my brain and my mouth.
Is that true?
What do I say? No, what you say is, see, and that's part of the challenge, but it's also part of the opportunity. Because for me, I've always been Justin Trudeau, son of, right? Yeah. All my life, I had to know that I was carrying a name and people were paying more attention to what I had to say. And I had to make a choice early on. Do I have a private, secret life, or do I live fairly openly and consistently with the person I am? Right. And I've always had that. So as I'm now in politics, where everything I say is parsed and used as an attack ad, if that's the way someone wants to use politics, I have to decide what's more important, that I always say exactly the perfect right thing and then it's carefully scripted and controlled, or do I try and trust that my values are the right ones and therefore are going to see me through, and that Canadians ultimately are worthy of trust in that they're going to see through to what a person really is and forgive a few mistakes and understand that we need a real person representing us, not just in Ottawa, but across the world stage.
You did say at the convention that you were into open ridings and open nominations, and then that's going away. Now you're telling people you can't run. So what happened?
What actually happens is that open nominations means it's local Liberals who choose who gets to be their representative. Not the leader, not the backroom guys in Ottawa, but local Liberals get to make a choice. But what that doesn't mean is someone can behave any which way and bully other people out of the nomination race and then be the last person standing. Canadians expect that the Liberal Party will have learned from its lessons of infighting of the past. I mean, there's a reason we're down to 36 seats. We turned inwards. We focused more on ourselves and infighting. Yeah. And I made a very clear decision that we are not going to be that party that is more focused on its own survival than on service to Canada. And that means making tough decisions about when people are not behaving in a way consistent with the kind of open service that we want to behave. Well, they don't get to be Liberal candidates.
But then you're telling people they don't get to be Liberal candidates.
If Rob Ford decided he wanted to run for the Liberal Party in 2015...
No threat of that happening, by the way.
That's why I use it as an example.
Right, yeah.
We'd say, no, sorry, the way you approach things, the way you've governed, the way you behave is not suitable to the kind of Liberal team we want to build. Now, there are a lot of incredible people out there who would make great Liberal MPs, and that's what I'm focusing on. And allowing them to come forward and be the positive representatives for their communities is the most important thing.
I'm glad you brought up Rob Ford. One reason Rob Ford is so successful is because he spoke to a whole group of people who didn't feel like they were being represented in City Hall. And one thing we're learning is that the majority of Canadians live in suburban spots now. And currently, the Conservatives have a very direct line to those group of people and those neighborhoods. How do you get do you have a plan to get your party back into the suburbs?
The plan is not around targeting, this area or that belt or this group of suburbia or these rural folk. The plan is to target Canadians, to not try and talk about the issue that is narrowly focused on an individual or a community. It's to say, look, people are struggling. The middle class is suffering. We're stalled. We haven't had a real raise in 30 years in this country for the middle class. We need to turn that around, and that's an experience that everyone is having. And when Alberta does well, Newfoundland does well. When Quebec is thriving, Ontario does well. Everything is interrelated in this country, and to try and subdivide and strategically, map out who you want to speak to and who you're going to ignore is exactly not what the Liberal Party is going to do.
There's no way that there are not people working with you in your department, in your party, who are not doing that. That's what campaign managers do. That's how you win elections.
Well, what I'm doing is getting out to every corner of the country and talking with as many people as I possibly can. And all my MPs are doing that, and our prospective candidates are doing that. But it's about putting together a cohesive vision that's not going to say, oh, if we win over this segment of soccer moms or these, rural gun owners or the Westerners who are worried about this but actually are, going to church every. I mean, once you start targeting Canadians in their narrow identities, you go against one of the core principles of this country, is that we are the country strong not in spite of our differences, but because of those differences.
Stick around more.
That's what we have to build on.
More with Justin Trudeau right after this. If it feels like Justin's been in politics since he was in diapers, it's because he has, and we've got the footage to prove it.
Everything stops for a baby who wants a bottle. It's a bit difficult to oblige in the cramped interior of a helicopter, especially when the plump little fellow is struggling. But by now, Mrs. Trudeau seems to have learned to cope with the problem under all circumstances. Despite the Prime Minister's refusal to use his wife as part of the campaign, clearly the family is going to be together for much of it. Mrs. Trudeau appears shy and nervous. Baby Justin has no such reservations, and he may emerge as the best campaigner in the Trudeau family.
Old school footage of you, right? How do you,
I'm just thankful Mom wasn't breastfeeding in that clip.
Imagine we play your mom breastfeeding. Listen, I sincerely mean this. I have no vested interest in who becomes Prime Minister, because democracy is what it is, right? But I was just thinking about your story, that if you were ever to be in the position where the voters sent you to 24 Sussex, how strange would that be for your mother?
My mom is actually one of the few women in the world who has had both a father, a husband, and a son elected as a member of Parliament. And certainly my family has, deeply believed in service to country, and I recognize how lucky I've been. But my mom was really worried about me in politics, because she saw firsthand just how devastating it can be to a country, to a family, to be in a position of serving your country. But I also got to have incredible role models, my grandfather, my father, but also my mom. I mean, she is spending so much time working on mental health issues. She's been on the show talking about it, that over the past few years, instead of people coming up and telling me how great my dad was, which they still do, as many people are coming to tell me about how wonderful my mom is, and that just blows me away.
How many people walk up to you and tell you how not great they thought your dad was?
A few. They usually don't sort of walk up and say it politely. It's usually shouted at me from across the street. But that's fine. I mean, you know what, I grew up, I remember the first time a kid came up to me in the schoolyard and said, my dad didn't vote for your dad. And I sort of, even at that age, went, okay, and that should affect me how? I learned that there's a lot of people out there who will dislike me instantly because of family issues. And I needed to sort of put that aside and be very strong about who I am myself. But the tricky part is there's a lot of people out there who just love me because of my dad. Right. And I have to also not discount their judgment, but put it aside and not let it define me, because I have to be very much anchored in what is and who I am, and not people's expectations, positive or negative.
It's something you've thought about a long time. We found this clip of you talking about a very similar thing.
Justin Trudeau and his team were lonely voices for the Confederation. Lonely and unpopular. Later, with a trademark family shrug, the young Trudeau said he doesn't much care what his peers think of his views.
Everyone's got peer pressure at this age. I mean, there's pressure to smoke, there's pressure to do all sorts of stuff. And I've never been affected by peer pressure. Never.
Who's that guy?
Yeah. Look at that, the poofy hair.
Yeah.
I was chewing gum during that interview, too.
I know.
I've come a long way, but not that far.
There's a radio station I listen to all the time. It talks sports, and one of the things that aside from them talking hockey all the time, is the constantly running commercials talking about, it's usually the voice of a mom, I assume a soccer mom, saying that Justin Trudeau is going to encourage my kids to smoke marijuana. true or otherwise, it's out there a lot.
Yeah, the Conservatives will attack on whatever they think they can, but the fact of the matter is on pot, we're failing our kids. We have the highest rate of teen use of marijuana of any of 29 different developed countries, and we are funneling millions of dollars into criminal organizations and gangs. Our current approach isn't working. It's not protecting our kids. We need to control and regulate and make sure that we're protecting our kids and not, feeding money into people who are happy to, be violent and sell harder stuff.
So what do you do? Like, what's your, I mean, we talk about controlling and regulating, but that's a very difficult process.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. When you look at what other jurisdictions have done, what they've done in certain states and in parts of Europe, you can see that once you demand that people show ID, you eliminate the black market, you make sure that young people don't, as they do now, find it easier to buy pot than it is to buy a beer, you're reducing the problem. It's not solving it perfectly, but you're actually getting control in a way that right now we simply don't have control. And even the Conservative government is starting to move in that direction, despite their attack ads on me.
Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
There you go. The leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, Justin Trudeau. We'll be right back.